Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristie Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristie Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Well, so we're together
in person
in our
looking all rugged at the end of this semester. Our semester's over, so we're casual today.
We're very casual, and it's rainy and gross.
It is very rainy here, and it stormed and rained so hard last night.
To have a dog interrupt us at some point, and cats, and you get to see my living room. Well, our fancy room. We call it the fancy room.
The fancy room.
Mm-hmm.
It is fancy. It has nice curtains.
I like the curtains. Excuse me. So yeah, we're here today in person,
which we're excited about. We don't get to do this very often.
No. And I was thinking about too, because we're going to be at the APT conference. Mm-hmm. So we have the opportunity. I think we should go ahead and have people that we want to talk to or that you guys are interested in. We can reach out to them and do it in person too.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah. And I think that would be kind of cool.
I do too.
I think they're going to be some fun people per usual. I actually just randomly talked to Dr. Linda Homeyer.
Oh,
she was really nice.
Dr. Homeyer.
I have only met her once, and I went up to her and I was like, hi.
Did you fangirl?
I did fangirl. And I was like, I really like you. And I too.
You like me.
I went to UNT also. Does that make me special to you? She
just likes you for who you are more than you going to UNT.
Yes, I think that was maybe I'll get an in or something, but she's been at Texas State, right? Forever.
She retired a while ago.
And she's doing international sand tray work.
She was just in Africa.
Yeah.
Nairobi?
Oh, I don't know.
Somewhere.
But she commented on a post that we had that someone put up about me winning the service award.
I know.
And I was like, you know me. Which she may just have been congratulations to this random person who's on here. But I'm going to believe in my heart of hearts that she remembers me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, she will.
So
she will.
We could talk to her about
that. We fortunately had her for NCAPT as one of our speakers.
Yeah.
And she's amazing.
She's just a nice person. She was she was part of the Association for Child and Adolescent Counseling when it first kind of started with D and
but you're a member of that board.
Yeah.
President?
I am president-elect.
Yeah, I saw that. You're doing big things. Yeah. It's good.
Dr. Haley Stumacher reached out and I had met the qualifications and she asked, and I love Haley. So
yeah,
I said, sure.
Good.
Yeah. So you had some of your supervisees ask
lots of questions about parents. So I wrote them down.
Okay.
And I thought we could respond to them and maybe do some role plays of how maybe we would respond.
I think that would be helpful.
Just so people can hear us.
What it sounds like.
What it might sound like.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
And when we talked about it, I told Kristie she could be the therapist.
She's like, you be the therapist, I'll be the parent, asking all the questions. And I was like, wait a minute, how did I get put into this spot? I don't mind doing it, but I think it would be fun for both of us to kind of give our responses, because I think just hearing multiple responses can be really helpful and give you alternative ways of being able to figure out your words to talk to parents. Because I think most importantly, if it's not coming authentically and from your heart, then parents read that pretty quick.
Yeah. And I think too, it's helpful. I want to also reiterate that we are able to do this because there's no pressure on us, right? And so we may seem really calm, but it's likely that in the moment our hearts would be beating fast too. And we would be like, oh geez, what do I say?
Yeah.
So I just want to put that out there that there is no pressure on us at this moment. So don't necessarily compare yourselves.
So it's on my computer. So I'm going to bring my computer over so Maggie and I can actually read this because we are getting old and our eyesight is not as good as it used to be. So
story.
We do encourage you, if you have questions, don't forget to reach out to us and let us know if there's a particular topic you want us to discuss or skills you want us to review, populations you're curious about from a child-centered play therapy. We will work hard to either find someone who is an expert in that area or we definitely like to research so we can look it up, gather some information, and then discuss it on our podcast.
Yeah.
You can put a comment on the podcast. We do follow those, or you can send us emails at info@playtherapyspace.com or
Maggie@playtherapyspace.com
or Kristie@playtherapyspace.com.
And we also have a YouTube channel so you can watch it. And then on our socials on Facebook and Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and LinkedIn, for Play Therapy Space, I do clips and like
Maggie's
little
the social media guru over here.
Yep. And I try.
She's growing as a social media guru over here.
I'm growing. It turns out that I'm not. They said to be a social media influencer, you have to put 7 stories out a day. I said, oh, it's okay.
It's not our full-time job.
I don't need to be an influencer. No.
I just did the Clifton Strengths thing. I'm doing this workshop this week, and influencing is next to my second last one on my strengths. So
eek. Yeah. We're working on it. We're working on it, trying to get our name out there.
Yeah. Well, or our channel, because we really believe in what we talk about.
The Play Therapy Space, not our name. Our name doesn't need to be associated with it. We're just having fun.
We are. I just like talking to you about play therapy.
It is. It's so fun. Okay. So what?
Okay. So these are all coming from supervisees who, when I asked what were topics they wanted, parents was overwhelming. Top choice by them. And so the first question that I got asked wanted us to talk about was how to respond to parents who want you to teach skills. And then the second part to that, and appear hesitant about the CCPT process.
Yeah. And I think this happens a lot in my experience. There's this idea, I think just in general, right, that kids, I'm researching right now for teaching course, how to teach. And this idea that's pretty antiquated that people are empty vessels that we have to pour information into. And not really recognizing, I think we're all a part of that, right? Like I teach, I'm like, here's the knowledge that I need to impart on you to be a good citizen. But that's not really how some of these things develop. And it's not the perspective of child-centered play.
Well, I think it confuses that the only way to get information is by asking questions.
Right. Which we've talked about in our last episode.
And I think for kids in particular, they often feel pigeonholed or like under the gun to have a response for us. I do think if you go in with lots of questions to get information, right, or to figure out where their skill base is, that you actually don't see the authentic side of the child. So from my perspective, and as a child-centered play therapist, is that I want to see it in their most natural form. So utilizing play and allowing them to share their experiences in play gives me a lot of information. I just don't think people look at play very often as a way of gathering and observing and learning about the child. They think the only way to learn is to deposit things into the child. Right.
And even when I think back on my own learning, especially a lot of the skills that I have parents kind of talking about is like emotional regulation or executive functioning. So like how to get tasks done. And as someone who really struggled with that as a child, it was something that I had to really like learn by doing what worked for me. And so it got to the point where now, does it work all the time? No. But I kind of have an idea of how I can structure myself so that executive functioning can happen. But it's not something that someone could have taught me how to do. I had to figure out what worked for me. And so kids, you can't just tell them be organized. Like, it doesn't work. And if you go up to my daughter's room, it looks so chaotic, but it's organized exactly the way she needs it to be organized.
So I have a sister, and we're pretty polar opposites in a lot of ways.
They're twins.
and we're very opposite. Just a cute little story. A few years ago, she called me and she said, "Have you ever taken the Myers-Briggs?" Which is an assessment that you can take about your personality, and it kind of gives you different indicators for features of your personality. Yeah. Because we've
done it.
Yes, I'm aware of what it is. And yes, I have taken it. And she's like, "What is your score?" And I was like, "Why are you asking?" And she's like, "Well, we just took it at work. And as we were doing it, I figured out we're the polar opposite. I think you are directly on the other side of where I'm at." So I pulled out my old Myers-Briggs, and our scores are polar opposites in the opposite directions, all but one. There's only one that we're closer, and that's the introvert extrovert.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's partly because I lie on the ambivert. So like I'm one step into introvert, but that like I'm a cusper. So, and she's on the other side of it, 1 or 2 points on the other side is extroverted, but a cusper.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting how we are opposite. And I say that because she is very organized and neat and orderly and
organized.
And my way of organization is piles. And my mom will tell you for my whole life, if you went into my room, and it's organized piles, but I could tell you I was a swimmer. And so sometimes, or oftentimes I swam in the morning before I went to school. And if I forgot something, I would call so my sister could bring it into school for me. And my mom's like, "Oh God, where is it? Where do I have to go to?" Or go, "Oh gosh, where is it? Where do I have to go into?" I was like, third pile at the end of my bed, halfway through, right under the blue shirt. And she's like, "Oh, okay." And she'd go in and she's like, "Yep, that's exactly where it was." And that is, so when I like organize my life, what I think society wants it to look like, I can't find a darn thing. But like if I put piles, I can almost go instinctively to it. And so I share that because I think we need to honor that in kids. And we often want them, we overlook their natural ways of, getting themselves organized together. And we want them to look the stereotypical way of appearing.
What that would,
someone decided that what humans should look like is always clean and tidy and all whatever. I don't know those people, but
it is. But I think these kind of anecdotes are really helpful for parents to hear. How do you organize yourself? What was that like for you?
And what was your childhood like?
And I think that can be helpful because it's like, oh, right. So maybe I'm asking them to do something and they're different and that's not how they organize.
Yeah.
And you also have to, I also have, my own organization stuff, which has shifted drastically into adulthood because I feel pretty responsible. I know where all things are in this house because no one, like, we all joke that it's the Lee look. And he'll look in the refrigerator and he's like, "I don't know, where are the capers? Oh, it's on the second drawer behind the jams and the, blah, blah, blah." And so I know where stuff is, and the kids struggle knowing where everything is. And so I, like the parents who come to us, feel the same way. Why can't, when I give you your clean clothes, when we fold your clothes and we put them in your room, you put them into your drawers. And they're like, "No, I don't like to do that." And they don't. And Molly, Rhodes less so than Molly. Molly has an organized plan where she knows where stuff is. So she figures it out and she's easier to find. But it is frustrating when you're on a time schedule and we're going to be late to baseball. And then the more you rush kids, at least my children, the more anxious and,
well, it's the harder, right? You're almost flipping their lid, as Dan Siegel would say, right? That they then can't really use executive functioning skills when they get overwhelmed, stressed, whatever. And so I think sometimes as we link this back to parents wanting us to deposit information, sometimes that just overwhelms kids. And one of my responses to parents is, and to my students, how would I then be different than all the other people in their life? If people have already deposited this information and it didn't stick, I hope as we talk more, you can trust in the way that I am able to connect with your child, help your child feel heard and understood so that they could share what's really troubling them. And then we can work through it that way instead of, question, answer, and I might get a little bit of it, but I find I get much more information if I allow them to be more naturally themselves in the playroom and share the information with me that way.
Yeah. I think, and it's them discovering what works for them. That it happens in that playroom, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like it. There are aspects that are mimicking the outside space where they are responsible and able to determine what works for them in those moments.
Yes.
And I think, again, that goes back to discovering for yourself, being much more meaningful than being told.
And I think it goes back to that idea of really believing in the capabilities of children and their ability to communicate what's important to them. It just may not come out how adults describe what's going on.
And I also think it's important to talk about development because sometimes the expectations are above the developmental level of a child. And so when we think about executive functioning or teaching them skills of listening skills. And I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. And well, I tell them once to do this and then they don't. And, oh yeah. If your child's 3, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a while for them to be able to kind of refocus. And I think also understanding, neurodevelopment and neurotypical versus not. And so for my kids who are not neurotypical, if I
like to call them neurospicy.
They are neurospicy.
I got that from Emily D. Baker. That's not my term.
Yeah.
She uses that. She's a YouTuber that talks about being neurospicy.
Well, and they got it from their mama. So I have to remember that it's not that they're not listening. It's that literally they're engrossed in an activity and they're so focused, they don't hear anything else. And so it's really disruptive and difficult for them
just to switch on
a dime in and out of that. And they have to do things in the way that they need to do things. And I am like that too. And so if I'm writing something and then you're like, you need to come do this, I get really frustrated because I'm focused on this. I don't want to go and deal with that. And so trying to remember those aspects, that it's not that they're trying to be disrespectful or that they're not capable. It's that this is where they are in this moment. And so I need to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
And kind of place my work with them, or my work, but like my discussions with them differently in those moments to make it easier for a transition. So I have to really kind of spell out, okay, so before we even go to school,
5 minutes,
right? In 5 minutes, we're going to do this. Or tonight, I'm going to pick you up from SAC. So have your baseball stuff ready. And you can choose to change in the car. You can choose to change at SAC. And it's really like kind of simple choices so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. Because I watch my kids at a restaurant just panic because it's too long.
Stimulation.
There's too many options, And so I think it's really about kind of trying to recognize your child. And so when I talk with parents, that these are a lot of the things I talk to them about.
I was like, what was our topic?
Yeah. So when they want you to teach skills, these are kind of the concepts that
I think we also need to dig in. What exactly are they hoping their child has? Because I think it's important not to make assumptions that this is where I think our reflective responding is really important, to really dig in, like what is happening between the parent and child at home or for the child, right? And what the parent thinks might be missing. Because if we already have built a relationship with the child, we might be able to respond, like help the parent have greater understanding too, that the child actually holds that capability, right? And how we have seen that play out in the playroom, which just might look different than the way the parent functions at home or like what the parent is hoping. But even being able to give them the perspective that their kid has that skill, and how do we help them tune into it at home so that they're having better communication, or, things are running smoother at home from a behavioral standpoint, or, anxiety.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to kind of reflect and respond with the parent about like what's going on with them in those moments.
Yeah.
And because I catch myself like a lot. And that's clearly, I'm annoyed with you. And it's easy to pick up in that way. And I don't want, so it's how are you responding? What are ways that you can calm yourself down so that they can calm themselves down so that these things can occur?
I try to remind myself a lot when working with parents that they are my clients too. I think sometimes we can over align with the child and forget that the parent is part of the system that we're working with. And so I think that idea of calming ourselves down or going into the parent session or the parent phone call with the mindset of, I really want to understand where this parent is coming from. And like, could some of their needs not, could some of their needs not, God, can't say it's out loud, right? Can some of their, may they not have needs that are being met either. Right. And so they have a want, a wish, and a desire. And if I can hear what that want, wish, and desire is, then I hopefully can respond with more empathy and really cue into where this is all coming from.
Yeah. And I think when you have the mindset that they're really doing the best that they can and that they clearly love their child and they're hoping to, they care about them. That's why they're here.
Yes.
And remembering that, I think helps, because it's easy to kind of start feeling defensive of the child because you have a strong relationship with them.
And sometimes because the parent is frustrated, right? They may be portraying the child in a very different way than I see the child. And so I can get defensive in action of the child because I feel like they're not being seen for their strengths or seen for, the good parts, and maybe what's getting highlighted are the problem-based stuff, which totally makes sense because that's what's causing the stress.
Because they're stressed out.
Well, everyone's stressed, right? And so identifying that as well.
Yeah.
But that I think is why we sometimes overly align with the kiddo over the parent. And it's really important that we also align with the parent.
Yeah. And having that same like empathic responding and unconditional positive regard. And I find that really helps parents then kind of allow themselves to open up and hear what we're saying about child-centered.
Yeah.
Because if you feel as if you're having to defend yourself, it's very hard to then take in information.
Yeah.
And so I think the same kind of tenet of if I accept you for who you are, I give you permission to change aligns with parents too. Yeah. And so really working on having that empathic response and remembering that you know what you're doing and you're doing it for a reason. And it's okay if they don't understand it or if they don't want it. Right.
Yeah.
And so giving them that permission when I find is really helpful.
Yes.
With parents. And helps them kind of get out of that kind of fight or flight situation into. And so I think that too, when I'm reflecting on the fears of that, how that also is a fear of working with parents.
Yes.
That I'm going to make a mistake or they're not going to believe me or challenge me in a way that it doesn't feel as safe as when a child challenges me. Which I think kind of diminishes children,
But I also think that's the second part of that question, right? Which was,
how do you explain
when parents are hesitant about the process of child-centered or aren't completely bought in.
Yeah. Because then it feels like you're like having to somehow convince them. And
I think that's where we go.
Yeah.
Right. We go to this trying to convince parents. And I think it also taps into our imposter syndrome feelings at times, like are we enough? Is this theory enough? Which I remember feeling early in my career. I think I'm in a different spot right now that I truly believe in child-centered.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's for every child, because that's the other thing I like highly acknowledge, that for some parents and for some kids, this is not the right approach, just like it may not be for adults, or if they're wanting something different. Do I still think child-centered or person-centered could be helpful? Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just not what they're looking for. And so I don't take that as a personal slight to me anymore. I think early on I was like trying to convince people that it's the right approach.
Well, and even I remember having this conversation with Dr. Ray. I had graduated, but I was living in Mississippi, and I was having a conversation with a very well-respected researcher. We were writing a chapter and I kept putting child-centered in, and he kept saying, oh, that's not evidence-based. And I was like, well, yeah. And he was like, Maggie, why aren't you saying? And I was like, because sometimes when you doubt. And so I started doubting myself and my ability to explain this. And they had made a statement that didn't feel like negotiation was possible. And so I backed away to avoid conflict. And I think sometimes that's how I approach sometimes with parents when they're like, this doesn't work. I'm like, okay. And so but then the conversation becomes, tell me what about this really doesn't fit for you. Help me understand what's going on so that you can then understand, because it may be that it's because, I don't know, they think play has no, like they're focused on academics and play doesn't play a part in that. Well, that's going to change then how I approach what it is that they are questioning, as opposed to just giving them something that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And isn't aligned with what their concerns were in the first place. And so really starting from that place of trying to understand, I think is a helpful place to start.
Yes, I 100% agree. I also think I guess I reflect back on my early part of my career. Have I done a good job of explaining what I do? Because part of the problem is I don't convey this message very clearly what child center is. I think about that sometimes. And then the other thing is I wasn't a whole 100% bought into child centered yet. So how do I convey something that I may not be 100%, or because people have questioned it, that I start to question it. And so I come across as a little wishy-washy as I discuss child-centered, or sure, I can do something else, or I'm really, really willing to bend to what a parent wants. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but they're also not trained mental health clinicians. So right, if we've gone through this training and this understanding, then we should be able to talk about how we believe our process can really help children. And so being able to answer hard questions, role play hard questions. This is one of the things I was telling my supervisees, that I think it's really important for them. At their agency, they have a great network of people for their network to ask them, describe child-centered play therapy to me, right? And many different people asking them in their own way to describe child-centered to them. So when they have downtime to do that, so that you have your 5-minute elevator speech. I appreciate D-Ray and Ahuline did this at a conference where we kind of did 2 lines, and we had to explain, if you were on the left side, you had to explain to the person on the right. And then every 3 minutes, we moved one spot. So you were constantly explaining it to someone else, but their response was different each time. So you had to really kind of fine tune how you talk about it and respond in the moment. So I was encouraging them to do that with their colleagues, to build their confidence in being able to respond. Yeah. And then as that gets easier and they kind of fine tune it and feel more confident in it, ask them to ask you a different question, but it's not really evidence-based, is it? Right? Start to help people help you feel more secure in your response, and people you trust, so that they can give you feedback. And I think, this is also one of the things that I have to remember, that as a faculty member now, I know all the research because I'm writing on it. But that not everybody has access or is doing that kind of stuff. And so how are we, I think that's part of what we need to do too as instructors, is this is what the evidence says. And this is where we're seeing it. Because sometimes, and we were just talking about this within our BAPT board meeting, of how can we translate. I think this has been a conversation in multiple different APT spaces. Is how do we translate this? Because if you're in practice all the time, I find it hard to read all the research because I'm busy. Yes. And so if you're in practice and you're seeing so many kids a day, and when they don't have access to the same level of research we do, because they're all behind paywalls, right? Which is why I like evidence-based childtherapy.com. I think that's right. It's on the Center for Play Therapy's website. If you go to their website and look under research, there's an evidence base where you can actually pull research that has been summarized for you. Right. And from my understanding, and I will double check on this before our next podcast, but I believe if you really need an article, you can call the Center for Play Therapy, and they will get you access to an article so that you can have the evidence you need. They've also summarized the meta-analyses, which are a great place to look at kind of what is out there, taking small studies and compiling them together to look at effect size over a large number of studies to show like the stronger effects of our research. And that's an important component when we're talking about evidence-based.
And there's also this website called ResearchGate. And so you can like search it, and then you can ask. So I get emails from people all the time, like, can you share this research with me? And I try and share it every time when it's possible to do so.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we are allowed to do that because we don't own the journals that we write.
You can't have it public.
Oh, so if they ask you personally, then you can share it. Okay. Yeah. I just wasn't sure whether, because the research actually belongs to the journal.
To the journal, it doesn't belong.
And so you don't get to just distribute it or post it publicly without permission.
Yeah, but it was, I hope that what you listeners hear, one, that we all kind of have struggled with this and we work through it and try our best to work through it, that every time that we have conversations, I learn something.
Me too.
And that I, as a parent, still struggle, even though I know all of this stuff. And so trying to give myself compassion and then giving parents.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to struggle. What is not okay as a therapist is to hide from that struggle. Right. You can't just not talk with parents. They're a huge part. And when I get new clients who've had play therapists before and the parents, like, I've never met with the person. I'm like, wait, what? I mean, I would like to be better at meeting with parents more regularly. But anytime a parent or something's coming up, I'm like, I think it's time for us to consult, right? I would love to be able to follow the every 4 to 6 sessions. It can be challenging. And I'm not always organized in that way. Right. And so that really is where my challenge is, not from a lack of want or desire. It's just getting myself better organized to be able to do that.
And I think also, like, on the converse, like, as a parent of a child in play therapy, it's really expensive. It's really expensive. And so
I don't then pay to meet with someone when you're thinking, I just need you to work with my child.
Yeah. And so I think that even as a parent, I'm shying away from meeting with play therapists because I'm like, listen, I'm going to let them do their thing.
One of the things I love. So at one of the agencies I worked at, on one evening a week, we had like an hour or a 2-hour gap that it was free drop-in for any parent and no cost.
Oh, that's great.
So parents could come in and maybe it formed a group and we had like a group discussion, or maybe it was one-on-one because it was the only parent who showed up. But it was a pretty cool way to like give back to parents. I really opened it up to my CPRT participants. So like when they were finished after meeting, for the 10 or 12 weeks, that here's a space you could come if you're having struggles or you wanted a little extra support, right? This is where you could come. And parents used it. Not all of them, but some of them really used it. They would maybe not come every week, but I would see them quarterly or, like once a month. They'd be like, it's my time to pop in and get some time with you. I didn't bill for it, but it built great partnerships with parents, which I think is important.
Yeah.
The other thing is I find when I give talks at preschools or other places like that to parents, right? It is a networking event that then maybe that's where they come to seek support, is with your agency. So if you are a practicing clinician and you're struggling, to get referrals or recruitments, think about what skills and what knowledge you have that you can give away, right? And yes, we love to be paid, but also sometimes giving things away brings people in.
Yeah.
Because now they have a resource. So they're like, oh yeah, when I was struggling with that Kristie girl, whatever her name is, the tall one, right? Where is she? Do you remember where she was from? Right. And then they may come back to you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you, Kristie.
Thanks, Maggie. It was fun to do this in person.
I know.
I wish we lived closer to each other.
I know. We might have some openings in my.
She keeps recruiting me to her university.
I know. It would be nice.
It would be nice, but probably not in the boat.
Well, that's how we know.
It's time.
It's time. Thank you.
Thanks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Email us with any questions or stories or topics that you want us to discuss. Our website is playtherapyspace.com. You can comment in this
through the podcast
comments or
the social media podcast, Play Therapy Space. And then
please join our Facebook, Instagram. We have
LinkedIn. Well, I have LinkedIn.
I have LinkedIn too. Yeah.
And then Pinterest and YouTube.
Yeah. Please like our space. That's where we share what we're talking about. And
if you have things that you would like, trainings or videos or ways in which we could support you as play therapists, that's our goal.
Yep. So. And we have some exciting things hopefully coming.
Yeah.
Maggie and I are going to brainstorm. We've got some ideas.
So thank you guys.
Bye. Have a good day.